Hello, everyone.
All right. Yeah, we are getting some people are starting to filter in.
Uh, Let me know you see David in the chat. I just promoted Emily.
Cool. Cool.
And I should be able to demote.
Yeah, you can demote Anushka and Shravan.
Can I? Oh, no, she's actually the main host. I'm the co-host. So,
It's okay. I can just chill with my camera on and not talk.
uh, Shravan, Shravan K, right? Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Goodbye. Cool. Yeah. David joins. You can just right click on him, anyone, and then just right click promote to panelist, and it should be fine.
Yeah, I don't think David has joined just yet, but we can get started with introductions, I think, at least for our organizations. So for everyone here, thank you so much for coming on Friday night. My name is Verain. I'm currently the VP External for Triton Software Engineering, and I'm a second year computer science student. At TSE, we build pro bono software for nonprofits while giving our students practical real world experience, both in design and development and a variety of other skills. We have a mission for social good, and we try to carry it out to the best of our abilities. So I'll let Ronak now introduce ACM.
Let's change my background. All right, sorry. Hi, I'm Ronak. I actually not the best person to represent ACM. That would actually be Casey. So I'm actually gonna have her introduce ACM.
Oh, I didn't know I was doing this, but we're doing this event in collaboration. ACM is a student org on campus that is focused around computing, and we do a bunch of like workshops and socials and professional development workshops, and we do projects, and we also have sub-organizations, which explains Ronak's background with the Innovate, and they focus on very specific like niches in computing.
Awesome. There's also another background. Looks like Henry is from ACM Hack, another sub organization. Perfect. Perfect. So yeah, now I think we can get started with some introductions. So I think we can just go in alphabetical order. So let's start with Casey. Why don't you introduce yourself? Pretty much, name, major, experience in tech, pronouns. Yeah, and that goes for everyone.
Okay, so hi again. My name is Casey. I'm majoring in computer science and I'm a third year, and my pronouns are she, her. And for my experience in tech, I spent the summer after my first year working in a lab on campus. It's a robotics lab. And I pretty much like did that work for free because I didn't get an internship that summer. And so the year after, I just like kind of grinded for internships a lot, and then I ended up getting a position with Google STEP, which is the freshman sophomore program. And after doing STEP virtually, they had an opportunity for the current interns to return as either SWE, or there's also opportunity to try out for APM, which is the Associate Product Manager position for interns. And so I applied to both of them, and I ended up going with APM intern. So I can talk a little about that if anyone's interested.
Cool. Yeah, very cool. Next up, we have David Hacker.
Oh, hello, everyone. I'm David. I am a current fourth year studying computer science. I'm part of TSE. I'm the VP Technology, I guess, or that's my role. And yeah, with respect to the places I've interned, I was an intern at Bloomberg my sophomore year, sophomore summer, and I was part of their market data infrastructure program, which connects various stock exchanges to different applications on the Bloomberg terminal, as well as to external clients. So part of my project was like essentially taking some or trying to build a caching layer in front of an existing service they had for stock summaries. And then the following year, so my junior summer, I was an intern at Citadel Securities. I worked on their options market making team, which trades, well, options on a lot of exchanges. And my project was sort of more multifaceted there, but the main thing I was involved with was setting some, or creating a tool to essentially better change interest rates for some of their pricing models. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Very nice. Very nice. Next up, we got Emily.
So hi everyone, I'm Emily. I'm a 5th-year computer engineering major about to graduate in a month. My preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. As for my experience in tech, my first year, I didn't do anything that summer. I didn't know that people did internships. I didn't know that was a thing because in high school, I'm used to doing nothing. So I spent the whole summer just playing League, drinking boba, and just chilling. My first ever internship was my sophomore year where I worked at a really low-key startup in San Diego called Kidu Systems. They work on electric vehicle chargers. I mostly just wrote Node.js code all summer. And then I spent a ton of time, 7 months, 8 months, grinding out internship applications, getting rejected endlessly until I eventually landed an internship at Google. And so I did 2 internships at Google. The first internship at Google, I worked on Google Machine Learning Crash Course, which my project is actually launched to the public right now. You can see the video player, I made that. And then I also worked on a prototype for a new feature for MIT Scratch. So that was cool. I got to work with the MIT Research Lab and work on the block programming language that like kids tend to use for coding. And then last summer, I was on the Google Vision AI team where I worked on a new product that was also recently launched, the visual inspection tool. And I'm also heading to Google again after graduation for full-time.
Congratulations. Very cool. Congratulations on graduating this quarter. Very exciting. And next up, we got Henry.
All right. Hey, everyone. So I'm Henry. I'm currently a 3rd-year computer science major with a minor in cog sci. My pronouns are he, him, his. And with my experience with internships, I didn't do anything my first summer after freshman year. But during the school year of my sophomore year, I got a part-time software engineering internship over at the San Diego Supercomputer Center on campus, where I worked under the Research Data Services division to create different web applications and other scripts for clients. And during the summer after my 2nd year, I worked as a software engineering intern at ServiceNow, where I worked under the application developments team to basically do a bunch of different sort of like app dev stuff for the ServiceNow platform. And yeah.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Henry. Next, we have Kunal.
Hey everybody, my name is Kunal. I'm a computer engineering major. My pronouns are he, him, his. And my freshman year, I got an internship at Avi Networks, which is a startup in the Bay Area. And they kind of specialized on load balancing services. And they had me work on like some internal debugging tools. And they actually got acquired by VMware, which is where I returned the next summer. And worked on a whole bunch of interesting tools, some web application projects too. So yeah, a lot of fun there.
That is a great position to be in when your startup gets acquired by an awesome company. Very cool. Next, we have Ronak.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ronak. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm a 3rd-year computer science major. I actually got into tech from a very young age, so I actually had my first internship right out of high school. I basically just emailed a bunch of companies on Wikipedia. I Googled San Diego tech companies, and I said, hi, trust me, I won't break your code. And then one of them hired me. It was really cool. So I did iOS stuff there. And then after that, I worked for the government for a little bit for a really cool program called Coding It Forward. And then I've also worked at a couple other startups. So I'm actually at a startup right now called Hatch, where I mostly do like product feature work. So at a lot of startups, because there's so much work to be done and there's not enough people, I kind of usually find myself working in a role where I'm kind of building the new kind of product features before it's like a company priority, and then like kind of experimenting in that sense. So yeah. Yeah, I'm working at Hatch right now. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ronak. Finally, we have our last panelist, Wesley.
Hey everybody, my name is Wesley. I'm a fourth year computer engineering major with a minor in music. It's kind of cool. And my pronouns are he, him, his. And a little bit about my tech background. I think my freshman year, was really lucky and I got an internship at Vocera. And what Vocera does, if you ever watch Star Trek, and they have the communicators on their, I think like left chest maybe. And so basically they make that, but for hospitals. And so I was in the test engineering division there, learned a lot about the industry. And then the following summer, after my sophomore year, I was able to get into Amazon and go to Seattle for that summer. Over there, I was in the chaos engineering team. And chaos engineering sounds kind of cool, but it's like glorified testing, which is kind of interesting. And it's just injecting chaos into your kind of your network of microservices and seeing what happens. Finally, after my junior year, I got into Snapchat, Snap Incorporated, and over there I was on the games iOS team. So I think if you have an iOS device and you've ever kind of entered and tried to play the Snap games, some features over there like the share card or kind of saving the game stickers to memories, like stuff like that, I had a pretty big hand there. So yeah, that's my tech experience. Nice to be here.
All right, so that is all of our panelists. We have a pretty wide range of companies going on here. A lot of different kinds of experiences. So that's really cool. And we had a few pre-submitted questions. So once we get through those, there's going to be a lot of time for all the attendees to ask questions of your own, and I might follow up with some of that based on the panelist response. So when you're asking a question, I'll remind you about this again when we get into it, but type it in the chat and preferably direct it to a panelist. Or if you want your question answered by all panelists, you can specify that as well. And we will hopefully get to that if we have time. So to kick things off with some of our pre-submitted questions, we have one question that I think is directed to all panelists. This is a pretty light one, so we'll stick with the same alphabetical order. But how should one approach not knowing something or being able to ask questions in your internship? So think of a time when you didn't know something and what did you do? So we'll start with Casey.
Yeah, I think my answer is probably going to be the same as everyone else's, but if you aren't familiar with something, spend at least like 20 minutes or so trying to figure out the answer yourself, like do some Googling on your own and just like show that you did the best of your ability to figure it out independently. But if you're really struggling on something and it's taking like probably close to an hour and you're still not getting past it, don't be afraid to ask for help from like an intern manager or one of the other engineers on your team, because sometimes there's a problem that like you would never be able to figure out yourself, and you can get the help of someone who's a lot more experienced. Then they will understand and they won't be like, you're not independent. And I think that will just like also show that you're really curious to learn things and figure things, just like solve problems. Yeah, that's my answer.
Yeah, that sounds like a great plan of action when you're at your internship. David, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, no, that sounded pretty great. In general, like I'd follow probably the same rule. I know that in the past, like my managers have always appreciated like sort of researching on your own before asking them, because it shows some level of initiative. And I think it's also helpful to, before you like really start diving into your code and stuff, to also identify resources that might be useful to you in the future. For example, when I worked at Bloomberg, they had their own like internal Stack Exchange sort of thing where you could like Google questions, and sort of like how regular Stack Exchange worked, except it was specific to Bloomberg. So like I spent maybe a few, like half an hour of my time just like playing around with it, like looking through some of the previous questions, making sure I knew my way around it just for future reference. And I think if you take, show that sort of initiative, people will appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's pretty interesting that Bloomberg has their own version of like a FAQ section for their own software. But that's totally helpful for interns. Yeah. So Emily, Kunal, Henry, anything to add?
I'll go. So I mostly agree with Casey and David. Take some self-initiative, do some research. But I'll also say I'm like one of the most annoying interns in the world, and I think it worked out in my favor. Like I'm a really, really annoying intern. And so I don't actually wait a full hour before asking my host questions. I typically go straight, or I go straight to them. I spend no more than 10 minutes Googling it. If I can't solve it within a 10-minute Google search, I go straight to their desk, bring my laptop, and I ask them to help me out. And I don't know, I didn't do that at first, but I take no shame in it. I asked my PM for advice, and she was the one who told me, bother, my host's name is John. She told me, bother John as much as you want. It's his job. He chose to manage you. Any question that you need answered, just don't wait more than 10 minutes. If you wait more than 10 minutes, you're not really being productive. Just go straight to him. So I would just go straight to him. And if he's in a meeting, if he's away from his desk, or if any of my managers were ever away, busy, I would just list all my questions on the side, continue researching, see if I can get them answered. But just make a giant list. And the moment they're back from their meeting, I will come up to their desk, have a list of like 20 questions, get them all answered as soon as possible. I don't know, like I agree you should do a lot of self-research, but also you don't want to waste too much time. And I think a lot of times managers will understand if you bother them. They did agree to manage you, so it's kind of their job. And they will also understand, like, that you're trying to be productive and get as much done as possible. And so I don't know, at least my managers appreciated it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, right? You're there, even though you're at an internship to learn, you're also there to benefit the company that's hiring you. So I guess they would want you to work productively. Henry, do you have something else you would like to share?
Yeah, so going off of what Emily said, I want to emphasize how important it is to ask questions during our internship. I would say that a good internship program doesn't really care like how many questions you ask. In fact, they should be encouraging you to ask questions no matter how like small they are, because it is for your learning. Then internship is mainly for the purpose of your benefit in terms of like learning and gaining experience. I know for ServiceNow, we had a sort of like knowledge base where interns could sort of go through documentation guides on different processes and workflows. And I remember going through those a lot before asking some of my questions, and then creating sort of like a list of questions to ask like my manager or like other engineers whenever I met up with them, especially before like our one-on-one meetings. So definitely recommend doing some research, but also asking tons and tons of questions.
Yeah, asking questions is the best way to learn. That is a famous quote said by somebody. Kunal, you're up next.
Yeah, I definitely agree with like Henry and Emily's approach. It's good to do a little bit of research on your own, but if you feel like you're going to get blocked for a really long time, just walk up to your mentor or the intern manager or whoever is kind of in charge of you and ask away, because like you get the benefit of actually getting like their insight. Maybe your Googled answer was not optimal and they have like this perfect situation fix. And it's also good to like build connections by literally just talking to them, because you get your question solved and you get to know them a little bit better.
Yeah, that's another aspect of internships, just meeting people, especially meeting people that you might be interfacing with on a regular basis. Yeah, Ronak.
Yes, I really agree mostly with Emily, because so I'm at Hatch right now. We have a policy at Hatch where if you have any question, no matter what it is, you ask it immediately in Slack. There is no 10 seconds or 1 hour. The reasoning is if you ask in Slack, first off, no one's checking Slack well, some people are checking Slack, but no one's going to respond to your question in 30 seconds. What you do is you ask it in Slack, then you can Google and do your self-initiative, and then you can respond to your Slack thread if you solve it. But most of the time, like if you think about it, the reason companies have multiple engineering teams, not just engineers working by themselves, is so you can share the knowledge between other engineers. Well, you might be like the god tier Node.js dev. You might have no idea how to do SQL or database. I'm just making up words, but like you're gonna want to talk to other people and get their initiative. And especially so like I think in general you should always ask every question in Slack as soon as it kind of becomes a bit of an issue, like 10, 20 seconds of like this makes literally no sense. You want to put it on Slack. And then when you're in person, if it really gets bad, that's when you go to their desk. In like the virtual world, I call it a one-on-one. So I just will DM someone, cold call DM someone, because people are pretty friendly, most companies. If they're not friendly, I'm not gonna lie, you probably don't want to go work there full time. Treat yourself better. Like if you're at a company where you can't ask questions, you don't want to work there full time. It's not worth the money. You're gonna just hate yourself. But yeah, just ask pretty much any question right away. And like, yeah. Also, one other thing that I've noticed, especially so I have a lot of startup experience. At startups, a lot of times things aren't written down. They really love it when you do write stuff down. So whether your company uses Notion or Google Docs or whatever, most companies have some sort of like source of truth. If you find something that doesn't make sense, or you find like the README is a little confusing, take that initiative to like update the README or make it more straightforward. Everyone's gonna love you. You're gonna make a pull request like your first week, and you'll be like, wow, look at me, day one pull request. Like it'll, yeah. So yeah, I would just say ask your questions almost immediately, and you feel free to research. It's always good to do that on your own, but yeah, ask your questions like right away.
Yeah, racking up those PRs. Yeah, there's a variety of advice. So I think like do what works for your situation. So take from each of the panelists. They've given a lot of different answers, and kind of mold it based on the situation that you're in. Wesley, you're last up.
Yeah, I think I would, the documentation point that Ronak brings up is actually really nice. One of the benefits that when you do get brought in as an intern, you're presenting the team with a fresh set of eyes. And so they can really tell, what's good, what's bad. And, it's a really good onboarding experience. And I think when you go into any new kind of internship or company, you can expect to definitely like not know anything. I don't think they expect you to know anything, and you definitely just won't. Because if you did, I don't know. I don't think that exists. But a thing that you can kind of take advantage of as an intern is the fact that you are an intern. And so with these questions, you don't have to be, afraid to ask, because everybody knows that interns know nothing. And everybody will be really happy to answer an intern's question, because, it gets them brownie points with their managers, essentially, because like, oh, check me out. I helped the interns and they're really good. So definitely don't be afraid to ask questions. And I think I had a funny story. So I know Emily was kind of a little more aggressive in going up to their managers or desk or something. What I would do at Amazon is I would just kind of stare murderously at my mentor for a little bit and see if he kind of sensed the intent there. And actually, most of the time, it started working a lot. He started glancing over quite a bit. And so that's how I got my questions answered. So do what works for you. You can totally go up to their desk, but sometimes a deep stare works. So, yeah.
Yeah, we all know how Wesley's stares strike fear into our hearts. So I guess the manager was compelled to do the same. Ronak has his hand raised.
Yeah, I want to quickly bounce on that. So Wesley mentioned like, you're a fresh set of eyes. Like, when you come to a company, you're gonna have a different perspective on things. You don't want to lose that. Like when you come into a company, you might be expected to do something a certain way, and you might have a different way of doing it. Like maybe give it a week or two, but like managers, like if a lot of companies like would be interested to, if you think you know a better way to do something, or you're just at the very least ask questions on like, hey, why do we do it this way instead of that way? Because sometimes they have a good answer and then you'll learn a lot more. Sometimes they might have just not known. Like a lot of code is legacy code, and it's a really huge pain to update legacy code. And so it's like, especially as an intern, like you're allowed to ask any question you want. So you can ask, why do we do this? Why do we do that? And no one's gonna get mad at you. It'll just be like, oh, okay, yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, those were a lot of really good answers to this question. The next question we have, I think, based on some of the introductions, I can kind of assign this question to a few people, and then if anybody else has any thoughts, you can hop on. But the question is, if I'm interning with a specific department where I know I wouldn't want to do that type of work long term, and there's another department in that company that does what I want to do long term, what is the best way to try to intern with that other department, probably the following summer, without seeming ungrateful or dissing the original team? I've been told it's much easier to get a return internship in the same department. So basically someone who wants to switch teams. So I think Wesley is returning to Snap under a different team. I think Emily was on a few different teams at Google. So the two of you can start, and then anybody else. Kunal, you're returning to VMware. David, I think you might be returning as well. So we'll start with Wesley and then Emily, and then kind of open it up to some of the other panelists. Ronak too. Okay, perfect. So this is a great question for everyone. So we'll start with Wesley.
Yeah, I guess a little bit more about my experience. I started off on the games iOS team at Snap, and then this year I'm returning to Snap under their machine learning team in their advertisement monetization organization. And so I think the advice I would give with regards to like not being ungrateful is, you just say you want to explore. At the very core of it, you're an intern and you want to experience as much as possible so that your breadth of knowledge, your different experiences can help you make the best decision for your career. And maybe this is a personal thing, but I kind of think that returning to the same place over and over again is not very productive to experiencing new things. Because when you get to go to different companies, different teams, it's really, you get that breadth of experience. And so the way I would kind of frame it to my manager or to my mentor, because everybody wants you to come back for, maybe full-time or back as a return intern, just say like you want to kind of experience something different and, you want to experience something new. And I think they'll all understand that you're trying to advance your career path as much as you can. And so having the breadth of experience will only make you a stronger engineer, or a stronger team member when you do come back, if you choose to come back, or if you go to that other team. In order, like the process of actually switching the teams, I would recommend just asking your manager, like, hey, I'm interested in the machine learning, like whatever. What machine learning does Snap do? They have computer vision, they have ad ranking, they have perception, they have a bunch of different things. And so can you recommend me some managers I can talk to while I'm still here at my company so that I can kind of get a better grasp of what that other team is like? And so you kind of talk, schedule one-on-ones with those managers. Kind of failed to mention this on the last answer, but don't be scared to talk to people who are not on your team. Because you're an intern, people want you to explore, and they're always going to be happy, even if you are cold DMing or cold calling them. They'll definitely be welcome to have a coffee chat, even though it's kind of virtual right now. Then you kind of go to your HR department and be like, hey, I really like this company, but I want to go to, this other place. Could you place me under this manager? And you give them a list of names. And that's basically how I would go about kind of successfully switching teams. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that, Wesley, and good luck with your team switch when you actually do end up on that other team this summer. So next up, Emily.
I 100% agree with Wesley. I think it's amazing to be able to experience different teams, different companies, different environments. It really helps you grow a lot as a person, even if it's within the same company. I had two vastly different experiences between my two teams at Google. I had one team that felt more like a corporate company, whereas I had another team that felt kind of more like a startup, because the team, the entire organization was only 30 people big within a massive company like Google. As for how to go about switching teams or exploring other teams, I recommend just being as honest and transparent about what your goals are with your manager. As transparent and honest with them as you can. I was very honest with mine at the very beginning, and he was really, really nice about it. My first post at Google, I told him that like I wasn't sure if I wanted to return to Google. I wasn't sure if I wanted to return to the same team. And he helped set up one-on-ones with different teams so I could explore, look around, see what other teams are like. He was actually very supportive of me exploring other teams. He also mock interviewed me so I could prepare for my interviews with other companies as well. So he was like completely on board with me switching companies if I needed to. He didn't mind because at the end of the day, like he did it, like he was in my place at one point in his life. He was also a past intern where he interned on 2 different teams at both of the companies that he was at. And so like oftentimes your intern managers will understand because they've been in your shoes before. As for my second manager, very much the same story. He also helped me prepare for my interviews. He also helped me explore different teams. And I just find that most of the time, as long as you're honest with what your goals are and what you want out of your career, your manager will be supportive of it. At the end of the day, like you're not like, I don't know, like you're not even like their full-time employee. You're not like their slave. That's what I was gonna say. Like you are like your own person and you are only there for summer. And like most of the time they understand that you have a whole future ahead of you and they're gonna be supportive of that. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's really great to be that your manager was super supportive. That's awesome to hear. And it seems like that's the case across the board, right? A lot of these people in these companies are quite friendly based on your reports. So be straight up. Ronak, I think, had something to say as well. Switch teams mid-year.
So yeah, when I work, so I work for the government. I hated my job like a lot for the first like couple weeks. And so I talked to the program was under like a fellowship, so there was like a mentor. So I kind of talked to my mentor about the frustrations I was having. And basically what ended up happening is I talked to the mentor and I talked to my bosses at the place working. And the thing is, they want you, no matter where you are working, they're an intern there because they want you to be a full-time engineer or full-time whatever you are. So if you're not enjoying it, and you have to kind of find a way to communicate that, like, I'm not feeling particularly challenged, or I feel like I'm not working on what I want to work on, whatever, they will try to work to like tweak either what you're doing or something like that. In my situation, I got placed on a way more technical support team as opposed to an actual software engineering team. And so what I ended up actually doing is, with the work I was assigned as a technical support, it was not as intensive. And this was back in the in-person days. So I actually kind of wandered around the building in Health and Human Services and found a nicer, more interesting office. And I kind of just wandered in there and said, hey, I have clearance because I work for the government like everyone else here, but I have like half the day free. And they were like, cool, we're understaffed. So I kind of just joined them. That's how I ended up working for like the more White House kind of facing team. And so working on other kinds of teams, like, I guess, like, just to distill it down to be like, if you're not happy with it, realize like as an intern, you're not at their mercy. It's like a weird mutual give and take, because you want to have a good experience, but they want you to come as a full-time as well. So you can kind of know your leverage that you have that, and you can kind of use that to kind of at least better experience. So in my case, it's a lot more extreme. I just completely switched teams. I dipped. I did not like it. But there's a lot of other situations where you can like, I kind of just changed the role. So I changed from being an IT tech person to a more technical support to more of an advisor. So I kind of hopped around. But yeah, the TLDR is, as an intern, you have leverage. It might not seem like it because you're like at the bottom of the temple, but you actually do have a lot of leverage in the sense that they kind of do want you to come back. So you can kind of talk to them about doing different kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool story. Just walking around in HHS and stumbling upon a new team. Does anyone else have any team switching, department switching experiences that they would like to share? Any thoughts on switching teams, even if you personally didn't? David, Henry, Casey, Kunal. Kunal, yes.
Yeah, I guess I just feel like when you're an intern, especially if it's like your first or second internship, you're kind of like a little bit like scared and intimidated by people. But people in like these companies are actually like really friendly. It's been mentioned before, but I just want to like reiterate it. Because my mentor, even though I returned to the same team, he was like, listen, I know like you have a lot of fun here, but if you want to explore other things, like I totally understand. I can write you like a letter of recommendation, blah 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 blah. but they really like want to see you succeed. Like in the back of their head is probably because they want you to return to like their team, but regardless, they're all really nice. Just reach out, be direct, and they'll help you out.
Yeah, that seems like great advice. Great advice. Cool. So that wraps up the second question that we had. The third question is directed to David Hacker. And David, this question is submitted by somebody who wants to know, how long is your non-compete at Citadel?
Okay, this is a very oddly specific question, but
You're in demand.
I think, so I will say that if you're an intern and if you do work for a Citadel or a similar trading company, they will not make you sign a non-compete. I've never heard of it being done because you're only there for 3 months. You will sign a NDA and like probably like a non-solicitation agreement as well. But if you are joining full time, you will have to sign a non-compete. So my non-compete is pretty standard. It's for 1 year. So if I leave or get let go or something, basically they pay my salary for a year afterwards. And I basically, yeah, it's pretty simple. I can't join like another trading company for a year. Sometimes they will, if you have an offer like ready to go, then if it's, you basically have to report it to them. And if they say like, oh, you know, this is a competitor, then you have to oblige by your non-compete. Otherwise, you usually, sometimes they'll just waive the non-compete if you're not joining a competitor, and you can just go straight to wherever you want to work. Yeah, usually not 1 year is pretty standard for the industry. Usually it gets higher if the more senior you get. But yeah.
I hope that answered your question, attendee who wanted to know. Cool. So that actually wraps up all of our pre-submitted questions. So we're going to dive straight into the Q&A section, and then keep asking questions in the Q&A, not in the chat, and we'll get as many of these answered as possible. So the first question is, what are things to keep in mind in a remote internship compared to an in-person internship? So I think many of you mentioned you interned this past summer, as well as the summer before that. So we can start with the people who didn't get a chance to answer the previous question. So Henry and Casey, and then we can move on from there.
Yeah, I have not had an internship in person, so I can't really speak for that. But I can say that a remote internship is slightly more difficult to have those like communication lines with you and your manager, because you can't just like be sitting in a desk kind of like in the same room and just look over at them and be like, hey. So it's kind of like, I think more, it's a little bit harder to just reach out to them if you have questions. And so I just want to say that try to like get past that difficulty, and like feel free to message your host or other engineers on your team as much as like you can if you like if you have questions, or if you just have something that you want to say that like doesn't relate to your project. Just try to like close that communication line as much as you can, because you have to go a little bit out of your way to do that. But I think one positive of being remote is that you can set up like the coffee chats that a couple people mentioned earlier a lot easier with people who are like in different time zones or in different office locations, and these are people that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet otherwise. And so I would really recommend taking advantage of that in a remote internship, because it'll give you the opportunity to just like meet people who have experience like maybe an office in a city that you never got the chance to visit and really want to like learn more about. My last summer, I like chatted with someone who spent some time doing full-time in Japan, and that was just like kind of interesting to just hear about that, because I never really considered moving to a completely different continent for a job. But yeah, it's just like it's kind of cool to hear about that. So I recommend just like reaching out to more people?
Yeah, absolutely. That does make a lot of sense because people don't all work in the same building, so it might be nice. Even if you're in person, you can probably set up those coffee chats at least with people that don't work where you are. Henry.
Yeah. So going off of what Casey said earlier, it definitely is a lot harder communicating and interacting with people in a remote setting, because obviously during things like Zoom meetings, you can't really like tell the body language of people. You can't really get to know them. A funny thing that a lot of the people on my team at ServiceNow were talking about is because we were in a remote setting, we didn't know how tall each other was relative to like each other. So it was actually pretty funny to like think about like, oh, who's probably like the tallest person or something. But besides that, because it's very difficult to sort of just get those like everyday like passerby sort of like conversations, you definitely have to be a lot more proactive in terms of like getting to know people and reaching out to people, especially in terms of like getting to know other interns. Because I know that a lot of companies, they tend to do like a lot of like intern related events. But besides those events, you really do want to make sure that you like reach out to other interns, maybe set up a couple of like intern lunches where you just like sit on a call together and just like eat lunch and hang out. Because that way you can like get to know your other interns, who maybe in the future you might decide to say room with them, like if you all decide to like go full time or something. And yeah, so you basically want to make sure that you're just really proactive about reaching out to people. And besides that, I think that's like what Casey mentioned about coffee chats. Those are a great way to get a conversation started, and just be able to like talk to people and get to know them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you really do miss that interaction with other interns. I think it'd be nice to at least try to do some things virtually with those fellow people in your shoes. Ronak also says, depending on the size of the company, they may even also expense that lunch. So get what you deserve from your company in terms of reimbursed items. Does anyone else want to add to this answer? Maybe Ronak, you can kind of expand on how to take advantage of your company in an online setting.
Okay, I don't want to say like take advantage of my company, but like, so like we have water coolers a lot with the other interns, and then so we kind of just brought it up like, oh yeah, we like meeting with our interns, and they actually just offered like, oh yeah, you should expense lunch because they want us to feel like we like working remote, because nobody, like, there's a lot of things that are okay about remote, a lot of things that are just terrible about remote, so like they're well aware of that, so like that kind of happens. Yeah, I would just say like, I mean, with the intern lunch that we have, it's just kind of like we're just chilling, and they're like, oh, we want you to feel like a sense of camaraderie along with your fellow interns. I work at a very small company right now, so there's like 4 of us that are interns. So just I guess like ask your manager, ask mentors, ask around. But like you don't want to. I mean, like you don't want to explicitly go and ask like, hi, can I get free lunch? You just kind of mention to your manager, oh yeah, we're doing this, and it'll happen.
Cool. Yeah, good to know that it might even, could happen at small companies. Snap had a cafeteria for free meals while in person. Yeah, so maybe Wesley, do you want to talk a little bit more about what that in-person internship is like?
In person is fun. It's fun. You get to see people. You get to, I mean, at Amazon, I know they had, they let you, at least in the Seattle offices, they let you bring dogs in. And so I had, one of my coworkers had a dog, and I would spend a non-trivial amount of time playing with the dog every day. So I think that was a highlight of my day. And but yeah, I think answering the question of how do you transition to a remote internship, I think the comments that were said about communication is always really tough. I think last year what worked for me is I had a mentor, and what we would do is like at the end of every day for like 15 minutes, we would have a video call. And that kind of really cemented, like, I knew who he was, he knew what my face looked like, and we could really connect and really talk to each other about what happened during the day. Because I think you ultimately do want to develop some type of connection with your intern manager or mentor or host. And the best way to do that is through kind of face-to-face interactions. If you talk just strictly business with them like all the time, it gets a little tough to develop that, because I think in person these conversations happen very naturally. But when you're virtual, you kind of have to force this type of things. So it's really tough. It's really tough. So I think my recommendation is like try, like, Slack is great and for text and stuff, but like try to get on calls more often than text would be my advice in these type of like remote situations, especially this incoming summer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, texting is hard. It's hard to read emotions sometimes. Does anyone else have anything they want to share, they want to add, to give more context? So how many of you are working remotely this upcoming summer? Henry, Kunal, Ronak, Casey. So Wesley, Emily, and David, you are all in person? No, Wesley says no.
I'm not
Okay.
working this summer. I'm going traveling now that
Traveling,
I'm double
yes.
vaccinated.
Post grad, double vax. That is actually a great choice. So, well, David, I know you had an interesting experience this past summer, right? It was like in this like bubble in Wyoming or Wisconsin or something like that.
Yeah. So I guess for context, like last summer was sort of weird for me. But Citadel did a pretty interesting thing where they had everybody be virtual for like the first half of the internship, and then they decided that everybody should be in person and flew everybody out to a resort that they bought out. And we just worked from there for 5 weeks. So it was pretty nice. So it's sort of interesting because like I got to sort of have both an in-person and a virtual experience within one summer. And also the in-person experience was still slightly virtual because not everybody was there. Um, but yeah, I mean, in general, like with respect to like what everybody else has said, I agree with it. Um, I think another challenging thing though with uh, maybe like a virtual internship is sometimes people won't get back to you immediately, um, especially if you message them. Like I never really had a problem with this personally, but I know some people who, for example, like got ghosted by people, or like sometimes they'd message their mentor and they wouldn't really respond that fast or at all. Um, so it's something to keep in mind, though. It does happen, and you just sort of have to deal with it. I think it does force you to be a little bit more independent at times because you can't be super like confrontational about stuff. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, that might apply to many of you who have somewhat hybrid internships. So you're going in a couple of days and you're staying at home a couple of days. I expect that might be a similar experience. Cool. So the next question we have on our list is from Advay. He says, how often should I meet with my intern manager? Shout out to Wesley for guiding me on getting my first college internship! Exclamation mark. Congratulations, Advay. Thank you, Wesley. So how often should I meet with my intern manager? So we'll start with Emily and then work our way around.
Okay. So in person, I'd say I was officially meeting with my intern manager once a week. So we do a weekly check-in. But really, I was talking to him every single hour of every single day, pretty much, because he sat across from me. And so most of the time, if you're in person, you're going to be sitting really, really close to your manager. So you should be talking to them regularly, really like getting to know them. I would eat lunch most of the time with my manager and really like, getting to know them. When it was remote, obviously like I couldn't see my manager all the time. And so what we decided to do was we decided to do meetings every 2 days. I know some other interns did meetings every single day with their manager. I recommend just at least trying to talk to your manager at least once a day in some sort of fashion. It doesn't have to be an official meeting, but at least like, keep in touch with them. They are like the person like giving you your work, and they're supposed to be your primary like source of knowledge during that summer. So try and like talk to them at least once a day if possible.
Yeah, it'll be a little tough to replicate that sitting next to your mentor virtually, but that's certainly a pretty cool experience for sure. Yeah, Wesley, since you're the one who guided Adve, maybe you can chime in.
I think I mentioned this earlier. Definitely at least once a day is the way to go. And I think, you know, your mentor signed up for this type of like, or your intern manager signed up for this type of activity. So, I think what you should do actually is determine a cadence. You ask them in the first one-on-one, like, how often can I contact you? And then whatever the response is from there, if they ask you like, what were you thinking? And then you just go, how about I check in with you twice a day? Maybe do an asynchronous one and we'll do a synchronous one at the end of the day. And, just like make sure you have a set expectation of what you have going in, and then you talk to them and be like, hey, this is what I would how am I gonna say this? This is what I expect, and the mentor has this is what they expect. And then if you meet halfway, it makes it a lot less awkward to, contact them with such a high frequency.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Does anyone else have any suggestions? I mean, I think we're getting a pretty consistent answer here, right? At least once a day. Anyone else meet more or less frequently that you would like to share? Anyone else hate their mentor and just didn't meet at all? David smiling. No? Okay. Okay, well, Adve, I hope you have your answer. I think I certainly do. And again, shout out to Wesley. Great, so our next question comes from anonymous attendee. What do you do with the extra time you have at the end of the day? What happens if you complete your project early or your tasks for the day? So this seems like a good question to start off with Ronak, because Ronak switched teams with the extra time at the end of the day. But if you want to, maybe talk a little bit more about just that general being an intern, what to do with that time.
Yeah, so I'll say, so my first week at Hatch, they gave me like some first ticket stuff and I finished my work really quickly. And I asked around. So I asked around, and there's always other work you can do and you can go for it. I will also say, you don't need to always be like, I think I'm guilty of this. Like, I'm an intern, like I want to put my best foot forward. So I'm going to take on every single job I can and I'll use all my spare time. I will also say, just relax. Like, you're gonna be busy, trust me. If you're not busy like that, if this is happening like week 3, week 4 in your internship, like you're having some spare time, okay, then you probably want to talk about getting some actual work. But if this is happening early on, enjoy the relaxation period while you have it. I use the time to cook, relax. Like, you don't need to be working every hour of every day. Work-life balance is really important. And yeah, but yeah, if you are finding yourself not having any work, you should probably talk to your manager and say, hey, how can I help? Are there any tickets I can work on? And there's usually something you can do. But also, like, just take a nap, relax. Yeah.
Yeah, learn how to cook. That is something I definitely want to do this summer. Emily.
I 100% agree with Ronak. If you don't have work at the end of the day, I know most interns like tend to take on more work if they have the free time. Try not to. Try to actually relax. Try to enjoy yourself. Try to have some fun. I'll say this: I'm about to go to full time, and I'm excited for full time work. But I also have been warned by a lot of full time employees that it's not nearly as fun as an internship, and it's nowhere going to near, or it's nowhere going. It's not going to be anywhere near the same experience as an internship. It's nowhere going to be as fun. You only have a few internships in college, and these internships could easily be the best experience of your life. You're basically getting paid a ton of money to just go like do a bit of work, but you're also getting like oftentimes fed by these companies. You're thrown into a bunch of events. You're living with a bunch of college students. Try to have some fun. Enjoy yourself if you can. I don't know, like go drink on like Friday nights or drink on like Monday nights, or like do something fun. Don't burn yourself out. Don't work all day. Like, take advantage of the fact that like you're a college student and for the first time in your life, you're like getting paid a ton of money and you're like, you have all this freedom and like, I don't know, enjoy yourself, because it's not going to be like that when you're a full-time employee. You're going to be working like 8 hours a day for like the rest of your life. So enjoy it while you can.
And of course, Emily meant to only drink if you are above the age of 21. If not, drink non-alcoholic beverages. And that was obviously implied in that answer. But yes, enjoy yourself and have a lot of fun. Explore your city, says Ronak. Go out every weekend. Go out with your fellow interns if you can. I'm sure that's something that people have done and had a lot of fun with. They tend to have some intern events too, so you could also take a look at some of those. Does anyone else have anything to add here? Kunal, go for it.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot has been said is like, go enjoy your day, have fun. In my particular case, when I was in person at Avi Networks, I actually pulled my like team aside for like 2 hours to play basketball after I finished my first project. So they didn't get a lot of work done, but I finished my work. It was a good time. Basically, if you can use the time to connect with your team or fellow interns or stuff like that, that would be really useful. And then I actually took up another project, and I didn't get to finish that one, but just the fact that you can like put that next foot forward is good.
Yeah, Kunal, from what I remember, I think you played ping pong with the CEO once.
I did.
Yeah.
So
always do that if you have the opportunity.
Did you beat him?
No, I suck at ping pong. I lost. I wanted to play foosball, but he kind of had the leverage in that conversation.
Yes. Always play the game that the CEO can win at. That's for sure. Yeah. Anyone else want to add to extra time? I guess we can kind of pair this with Justin's question. How do you manage your work-life balance? Because Justin says, I feel like my current work-life balance is mostly regulated by finishing assigned tasks like schoolwork, but I'm curious about whether that's sustainable in a company where there's always more work to do. So does anyone have anything to share on this specific part of the question? So we can start with Emily, maybe get to Casey and Henry, maybe David afterwards.
Yeah, so I saw this question earlier and I already had like an idea in my mind. I know that like it's tempting, like I know that there's normally always going to be more work to do, but one of the really, really nice things about working like at full-time at a company versus school is that there's no concept of homework, there's no concept of projects, there's no assignments due at like 11:59 p.m. Really, you're only expected to work 8 hours a day at most. And so if you want a good work-life balance, I recommend you keep yourself to that. Do not work overtime, especially because oftentimes you aren't even paid for like by the hour or for overtime. Most interns I know of are paid salary. So take a chill a bit. Don't work over 8 hours a day. Don't force yourself to. And I've seen some interns work on weekends. Definitely don't do that. Please don't work on weekends. Like Ronak said, go out, or like Wesley said, go out every single weekend. Just I like just work by like the hours, by the time. Don't like work as if like it's like school assignments and like you're expected to get done at yeah, that's pretty much all I got.
Yeah, and I guess that would hold even if you do get paid hourly, right? Don't that extra $50 every single day adds up to not too much money, but it causes burnout. So be careful of that. And yes, you will feel guilty about not working as long as you convince everyone else to stop working as well. True. Especially as college students, we certainly feel that. Kunal.
Yeah, I guess to build on Emily's point, it's really, really nice to have an internship, especially when you're doing nothing else over the summer, because like once you hit that like 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, you literally that time is your own. It's not like you have an assignment or anything. I love to play basketball, so every time it hit 6 o'clock, I just like get the rest of the interns to play. We had a hoop outside in that nonprofit parking lot, so yeah, just make whatever time you have to like do the stuff that you like. Don't work over the 8 hours that you have to.
Yeah, absolutely. Casey and Henry or David, we haven't gotten to you in a while, so do you have anything to share in particular?
Yeah, I'm I'm feeling a little jealous of these in-person internship comments, so I'll give an answer about the remote internships. I would say like all of the advice that we got at the beginning of the pandemic, like really can apply to having an internship and like regulating your schedule. Like set a certain range of hours when you will be working, and like when it hits 5:30 or 6 o'clock or whenever, like tell yourself, okay, I'm not going to work anymore. And in the morning, like set your morning routine, like you're gonna wake up and have breakfast and brush your teeth or whatever, and just like don't work on your bed. All those like good advice that we got for quarantine, apply that here, because I will say you will have a lot less work to do during an internship than when you're in school. Like I think when I'm in school, I'm working like every hour of the day almost. But when you have an internship, you're not expected to be working every hour of the day, and you shouldn't be. Don't burn out. You're gonna have so much more fun if you do this.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of those things will be important because, as everyone raised their hands pretty much here, most internships are still virtual for this upcoming year. Henry, do you have anything to add to work-life balance?
Yeah, so just wanted to emphasize what everyone else has been saying. As soon as that clock hits like 5 or 6, just stop working. For me, I did my best to just like shut off my brain in terms of anything work related. So as soon as that clock hit like 5 o'clock, I was like, no more work, time for like video games or like Netflix or something like that. And another thing that Casey also mentioned that I also want to emphasize and expand upon is a thing about sort of separating your work location as well as your like everything else location. So especially like during an internship, when you're especially during a remote internship, you want to have like a separate like work location for your internship than where you do like everything else. So for me, when I did my internship at ServiceNow last summer, what I did is I had my main desk, which is like where I do all my normal like recreational stuff. And then on the other side of the room, or for you, it might even be like in a completely different room or something. That would be where you would do all of your work and have like your work laptop and do all of your meetings and stuff. And as soon as that clock hits 5 o'clock, you shut off your laptop, hide it out of sight, and just go and do something else. So definitely recommend having that sort of like physical separation between work and life is really helpful in terms of like sort of separating your mindset.
Yeah, definitely. Physical separation of that stuff is really important. Even for school, I would say. For the rest of the quarter, that's something that I would like to keep in mind as well. David, any last thoughts?
Sure. I mean, okay, when I worked at Citadel, I'll be frank, the traders, they took their work-life balance, they just kissed it, and then they like threw it over their shoulder, goodbye. I mean, I can tell this is a software engineering panel because everybody's working 40 hours a week instead of 80. But I think in general, like I agree with everybody. I will say that I don't know, my experience has been slightly different depending on the company I've been with. So at Bloomberg, I'd say like it was more of a traditional 9 to 5, 8 to 4, whatever job. As long as you got your 40 hours a week, it was fine. With Citadel, it was sort of the same, except some of the deadlines were a bit more crunched because they try to roll out strategies pretty fast. So the strategy that I sort of adopted was I spend more time some days working on features, and then I spend less time on other days. So I still have like maybe net 40 hours a week, but this gets sort of molded based off of exactly what task I'm working on per day. But yeah, in general, I would say, you shouldn't overwork yourself. It was funny. I used to see some interns working at 2 in the morning on their projects, so I would caution you from employing that strategy, but yeah, sometimes desperate times call for desperate measures.
Very desperate indeed to be working at 2 in the morning. So we'll be moving on to another question. We'll do a quick one just kind of a round from, or like a nod, raise hand, something. Justin asks, when communicating over Slack or email, were emojis or emoticons generally accepted? Emily is putting a thumbs up. Ronak, vigorous nodding. Casey, 2 thumbs up. Wesley with a nod. Henry with a nod. Kunal, stoic face. And sounds like that works. So custom emojis are fun as well. Definitely the case. So Justin's getting some good questions answered here. We have a few questions left. Anonymous attendee asks, any suggestions on how you can get a return offer? So some of you are returning to the same company. You can start there, especially some of you graduates. But yeah, we can just start right back up with David.
Sure, yeah. I would say getting a return offer, first of all, really varies depending on the company. So, first of all, do your research and make sure you know exactly, if you do want to work with this company in the future, what their return offer process is like. For example, Bloomberg pretty much gives return offers to everybody as long as you didn't massively screw up. But Citadel stack ranks and then gets rid of the lower people and then keeps, the upper people and tiers them based off of that. So, so you should be aware of those sort of statistics. And then obviously, the things that they would probably rank you, or sorry, like look at would be performance, maybe like dedication, communication abilities, I don't know, really anything that could be factored into like your evaluation. I think it also helps to maintain a list of like what you've done during internship. So like, keep a document or write it down somewhere. But make sure that you know exactly what you've done so that if, you're asked to fill out like an evaluation form, you can just be like, okay, I did this. It took me this long to do this. And you can pretty much just bullet point everything. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Anyone else, returning? Wesley, you're returning to Snap, right?
Yes, that is correct. I think the gist of it is just don't be bad, but that's like a very bad answer. It's a very miserable answer. But I think what I would highlight is if you feel like you aren't being very technically strong, or if you find yourself struggling a little bit in terms of the technical realm, or keeping up or not finishing your tasks, then try to be really good in other areas. Maybe you're a really good culture fit. Maybe you bring a lot of liveliness to the team, and it kind of makes them, it's always a joy for them to see you every day. Like these kind of uncommunicated, you're only like you are not only evaluated based off of your ability to deliver. I think that's definitely a main factor, but there are other factors you can totally, leverage, like, like the in-person culture bonus, or, you add to your team in some other way. Like if you're able to contribute in other ways, then you can kind of overcome this, perhaps you're struggling in that metric, you can kind of overcome that. But yeah, generally, if you're like super nice to everybody and you have like good, like, I don't know, if you talk to everybody and they like you and then you do your things on time, generally it's pretty easy to get some sort of return offer.
It's certainly encouraging to hear. Emily.
Okay, so like David, I'll talk a bit about my specific company, like return process and how it worked and my experiences. For my company, we did like mid-season or mid-internship reviews. Honestly, I don't think those meant anything. But at the end of internship, our hosts and our co-hosts would submit reviews, and then they would basically just say if they think we did a good job or not. And yeah, that's basically what it is. And then if both say you do a good job, then you can get a return offer for a second internship. And as for full-time at Google was kind of like basically full-time at Google. It depends on how many pieces of positive feedback you got. So if you got 4 pieces of positive feedback, basically if you had 2 internships and all of your hosts said that you did a good job, then you would get a return, and otherwise you would have to do additional interviews. And so where I'm getting at with this is that it is partially like subjective. It is kind of dependent on whether or not your hosts like you and whether or not they think you did a good job. It doesn't necessarily mean that you were like that you get all your work done. Like Wesley said, I would like 100% agree with Wesley. It's not always all about like you getting your work done. Sometimes it's about whether or not you're a good culture fit. Oftentimes it's about whether or not you were just a positive asset to the team. Many times companies would rather, hire people who they think would be a great person to work with over someone who just only gets the work done. Like, it's not always just about getting your project done. Like, getting your project done, that should be like a huge priority, but also like try to also just come to your internship every day, be a very positive and friendly person, be someone that, that other people want to work with, that you would want to work with. Try and be a positive, happy, charismatic, fun person. Don't just go and like work all day and be in your own bubble and like not talk to a single person. Just be friendly and people will like you and people will want you to come back. That's pretty much it.
That is a good advice for life. Be friendly and people will like you. And yeah, Sashank, I hope that also answered part of your question in the chat. You probably don't have to go through any additional interviews. Cool. Does anyone else have anything to add on return offers, be it internship or full-time? Kunal, I know you are returning to VMware, right?
Yeah, so one thing to keep in mind, for at least in my situation, when I was returning from Avi Networks to what eventually became VMware, or a part of VMware, they weren't actually technically allowed to give return offers. So I just kept in contact with my mentor and reached out in like January of that year, or the next year. I was like, hey, can I return to the team? And he basically just said yes. So make sure you keep in contact and figure out what the return process looks like. Another thing that it's kind of like a good problem to have is if you want to return but are like low-key trying to explore other companies, make sure you kind of budget out the time that they give you, because when they give you the return offer, it comes with like a deadline to sign. And if you're like applying for another company that you want to get into and they don't actually get back to you until after that deadline, then you kind of have to move things around accordingly. So that's one thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, very important thing to keep in mind is whether you want to renege the company that you asked for a return offer from.
Never.
Yeah, but it really does depend on your situation. So you reach out to people to ask them about what to do in that situation. Casey, Henry, anything to add, Ronak, about return offers?
I guess one thing I want to add is just be very honest with your current manager or host that you are interested in a return offer, because they are also there to help you and they can give you work or like give you pointers for how you can make yourself stand out. Like for example, my host last summer, he like had us write additional like design docs as like a artifact that we could submit to our the review board who decides if we can get a return offer, and it just shows that like you're doing more work than just the bare minimum.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the common things that at least I've heard from all of you is about communicating with your manager and being direct and upfront. So I think that's a pretty big takeaway in pretty much all of these questions. All right. So yeah, host would have me do easy work. Awesome. Yeah, that's great to hear. So communicate with your manager if you do want a return offer. Cool. Next question. What do you talk about with your manager? Is it super professional and work only? What's a good balance? Maybe we can start off with Emily, because you mentioned you had lunch with your manager all the time.
Yeah, so with my first manager, it was kind of a mix. At the end of the day, he's still my manager, so it's still a professional relationship. And we would oftentimes like go back to talk about work. Like, I can't tell him every detail about my personal life. I shouldn't be. Don't do that with your manager. Just say what you feel comfortable. Like tell them what you feel comfortable telling them. Really, like, it boils down to like how you feel like. Yeah, it boils down to like what you feel like the relationship should be like. Like, if you don't feel like sorry, that's distracting. Okay, sorry. Yeah, it really boils down to what you feel like the relationship should be like. Like, it doesn't have to be too professional. It doesn't have to be too personal. It's really all up to you. I'll say that for me, whereas I wasn't always super personal with my manager, I was more personal with other people at Google. Like I had a mentor who we didn't talk at all about like work. We would talk more about like whether or not I was like getting comfortable in Seattle, whether like what I was doing outside of work. I would also have those types of conversations with other interns, and that would help out a lot. Like, it really all depends on you.
Yeah, definitely. It's good to strike that balance. Henry, do you have any thoughts about what to talk about with your manager?
Yeah. So generally, at least during my experience talking with my manager, for the most part, I tended to keep it more on the professional side. But I did have occasional small conversations about them, like, oh, like, how's it going? Like, what's going on in your life? Like anything happening that's been really interesting that's happened. And we just tend to have like sort of these like friendly conversations about like hobbies or stuff like that. One of the things that my manager and I always did during our meetings, I guess during our official weekly meetings, was that he would ask me sort of like how happy I was feeling during the internship, as well as if there was any like drama or blockages I was facing throughout the week. And from there, we basically just had a follow-up conversation about like, oh, if there was anything that he could do to help out my situation in terms of like being able to get the best internship experience I could. And of course, I would ask him the same, like if he was, just to get a sense of like how happy he was with working for the company, so that I could get a sense of like, oh, what would it be like to work for the company as a full-time employee, just to sort of get a better snapshot of like what the average life of like a full-time employee at the company was. And from there, it was a really good icebreaker, I think, for a lot of our meetings, like our official meetings, in terms of being able to start off our day and sort of warm up to each other and get to know each other better.
Yeah, definitely. I think scoping out some of that information is really useful, especially for someone who's been in the company. Ronak, do you have anything to add here?
So in terms of return offers, with startups, it's really interesting because they'll basically tell you like straight up, hey, we want you to come back, because there's no like return board. So for context, the largest company I've ever worked at is the current company I'm working at, which is Hatch, which is like 60 employees. I mean, the government is much bigger, but the government really wants people, so they will give everyone a return offer. Usually because I know like the CEO, I know all the people, they'll just be like, yeah, we want you to return. And as far as like how to get a return, it's just is I think the number one thing they look for is people who listen. As long as you are kind of listening, communicating, and like know what you're doing, and like I think all the advice has been said is the best. Yeah. Because like talking to your manager is just kind of like, I don't know. I just DM him a lot. I just talk to him. We talk about ice cream a lot. My manager is a big fan of different kinds of ice cream, so he's been telling me different kinds of ice cream shops in SF. So, yeah.
Ice cream aficionado. That is great to hear. That you're connecting with your manager on a pretty cool level. Does anyone, David, Kunal, Wesley, anything to add here? Casey, about your manager, or should we move on to the last couple of questions?
I think one thing I would contribute here super quickly is this is a general principle for I think the future is don't become really good friends with your manager, because they're the one that pays you. And so if like they happen to take advantage of that friendship to pay you less, or whatever, there might not be, there's nothing good to come out of this. So know your worth, and yeah. So to best avoid those types of like weird like friendship, like you want to do negotiations for a raise or for a promotion, like it's a lot harder to do that with if you have like a friendly like if you have a friendship that the manager can leverage. So just be a little wary about that, and if you could avoid it, try to avoid it, but always be professional for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely good to keep in mind. Know your worth. You're valuable in your own way. Cool. So we will move on to the last couple of questions. The first one being, do you recommend preparing for anything before starting your internship, or is it not necessary? You could just do a thumbs down if you don't think it's necessary. Otherwise, anything you want to share about preparing? we got a couple of medium thumbs here. So let's start with David, and then we'll go Emily, Kunal, and Henry, and then circle back to Ronak. Wesley is a solid thumbs down here. So Wesley says no preparation at all. David.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a middle thumbs because I guess gestured that, because I don't think it's completely necessary that you do so, but I think it could be helpful, especially if you know the team that you're going to be working on and they provide you with maybe some resources to read up on. For example, like one of the team, like the team I was going to work on last year, provided me with some like resources on Cassandra because that's what my project was going to be focused on. So I was like, okay, I'll just go and read up on Cassandra, maybe demo it a little bit, try and make my own project around it. And I think it was helpful. And same at Bloomberg, at Bloomberg, like my team was like a pretty heavy C++ team, and they used their own version of like the C++ standard library. So I just went ahead and like prepared and read up on their standard library and just made sure I was familiar with it before going in. And I think that sort of saved me time in the long run because I didn't need to do it during my internship. It was already done ahead of time. But in general, I would say, you don't need to. You can always do it during the internship. It just expedites things.
Yeah, that's totally fair. And I think maybe a lot of these middle thumbs are a similar comment, not necessary, but recommended or something to that effect. Why don't we have Kunal go next?
Yeah, I'm generally of like the mindset that you're kind of being paid to like learn whatever they're trying to get you to learn and apply it. So there's not really a need to learn ahead of time. That being said, if during the application process or interview you like swore that you were like a C++ god and you actually have no idea what a pointer is, you should probably review that. And I can speak from personal experience that you should definitely review it. Not that it affected the internship.
Personal experience. So please elaborate.
For my Avi Networks internship, it wasn't exactly like the C++ thing, but I guess they were looking for like you should have like some sort of knowledge of the company, and they worked on load balancing services, and I really was not. I had no idea what it was. So when I interviewed for it, I had like all these notes prepared. They had they literally had a textbook on their website that explained what load balancing was. And I tried to read through the textbook. It was like all jargon. So yeah, I'd kind of like rehearsed a line so that I would kind of pass some initial question that he asked. And I mean, it worked out. But yeah, definitely review if that's the situation you're in. Otherwise, you can always do it on the job. And also one more thing is that if it's not something like that to that like severe extent, showing that you're like learning something new while you're working there is kind of a good look. It shows that you're putting an initiative, and they might not know that you put in this initiative beforehand, and therefore won't appreciate it.
Yeah, that's certainly fair. They don't know what you're learning before you get to the job, but they can see what you're learning while you're there. So I think we have Casey go next. Or Casey was also a thumbs down here, right? You don't really need to do anything.
I kind of agree with what the other panelists have said so far. I don't think that like they're really expecting you to be preparing things beforehand. You can obviously like email any host that you have and be like, is there anything I need to do to prepare? But it's likely that they'll be expecting you to learn on the job.
Yep. We'll go. I think Emily and Henry were the other two middle thumbs. What do both of you have to share on preparing beforehand?
So I pretty much agree with David. Like you don't have to prepare beforehand, but it does help. I know for my very first internship when I was a startup, I didn't prepare beforehand at all. And so it took a few weeks before I was even able to get any code in. Whereas for my second internship, my first internship at Google, I prepared beforehand and it helped out tremendously. I submitted a PR my very first day and I managed to get a ton of work done. That summer, I was able to do 2 projects. What I personally recommend is whether or not you prepare is really up to you, but I recommend at least sending an email to your host and asking, much like Casey said, like at least ask them if they think you need to prepare, it's at least a nice gesture. And oftentimes, like, it leaves a really good first impression. Like, even if they tell you like, oh, maybe you should learn this, and you don't learn it, like, at the very least, since you asked them, they'll appreciate that you asked them, that you're putting some thought into your internship ahead of time. Because a lot of students don't, if you just do that, like, that's what I did for my last internship. I asked them if I needed to prepare anything ahead of time. They told me Angular. I didn't do anything. I didn't do any Angular until I started the internship. But they were really happy that I asked them, and they loved me, and it left a good first impression.
Yeah, that's really good. Especially if they give you a heads up, you can kind of in your mind figure out, make a prediction about what you're going to be working on. Henry.
Yeah, so I'd agree with everyone else in terms of maybe at least recognizing like what parts of the tech stack you're going to be using during your internship. You don't necessarily have to like go through the documentation and like learn all of like the languages aspects, but you should at least, I feel, know what you're going to be using during the internship. And then on an unrelated note, besides talking about like how you can prepare with like the tech stack and stuff, I think another big part of what you should do in order to prepare for your internship is actually going to be like reaching out to your managers and mentors, not just with an email, like asking them to like what you should do to prepare for the internship, but I would actually recommend like setting up like a Zoom call to like actually get that initial meeting before you start the internship, to sort of like get to know them, get to know the team maybe a little bit, and then also get to know like what has been their experiences working with the company. So that's another thing that I would recommend preparing for before your internship.
Yeah, absolutely, especially in like the virtual internships coming up. Wesley and Ronak, do you have anything to add here?
I'd say like kind of what Emily said, like, you don't feel pressure to. You can always reach out and ask about learning something ahead of time. I think for some internships, I did do stuff. For some of them, I didn't. Like, so for my current internship at Hatch, they use Kotlin, a language I never really used. So I like went to the website and like poked around a little bit, and then figured out how to kind of like do some stuff with it. But I didn't do anything else beyond that, because most places, like, the first week is gonna always be like getting you used to it. So don't feel pressure to. I did like a medium, but mostly bottom, just because like it doesn't hurt to reach out. It always makes the manager be like, oh, nice, this be like, person's gonna be proactive, but don't feel pressure to.
Yeah. Definitely helps to have some insight. Wesley.
Yeah, I would say like definitely if you feel compelled to like study beforehand, definitely go for it, and definitely reach out to your manager beforehand. But I think I think what Ronak said is very true. As long as you remember the fundamentals. Like, for example, you're going into a machine learning internship, like, I guess know a little bit of the fundamentals of machine learning and understand how that works. But there's no need to be like knowing everything in the field. And so I think you can pick up a lot of stuff in the first week, and that's what they do expect. People most of the time they onboard on their first week and they kind of learn. So if you want to like, maybe not learn as much during your first week, there is probably some advantages to reaching out early and picking stuff up. But it's definitely not required because you're not getting paid to do it. So yeah.
Yep. And they will do onboarding at your internship. So you don't need to worry too much about that. I think this last question we have on the Q&A is about if you're stuck at some part in your project, who is the first person to reach out to? We definitely talked about that earlier. Reach out to your mentor. Maybe you want to do a little bit of research ahead of time. Maybe you want to send a Slack message and answer it yourself. Those are some of the strategies that were recommended at the very beginning by our panelists. Cool. So with that being said, it is 7:30 almost, and we've gone through pretty much everyone's questions. Very exciting. And thank you to all of our panelists for, I know I certainly learned a lot, so I hope all of you participants did as well. And you got a lot out of it. So have a lot of fun at your internships, learn a lot. And yeah, that's all it is from me. Maybe, Anushka, the host, can decide how to end this meeting.
Yeah, no, I just want to say that I learned a lot as well. I'm going into my first internship this summer, so it's very helpful to hear everyone's perspectives who know so much about this already. And thank you to all of the participants for joining us and giving us your Friday evening. And yeah, that's all I have. So thank you to ACM and TSC, and yeah, we're good. So have a nice weekend. And this panel will be recorded. If you missed something, I will be posting the recording on the Facebook event, or it is recorded. Yeah, that's all we have. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.